policies and practices at the organizational level, as well as kind of norms and the way things that are done kind of more at your local team level. So to start with, an organization in which people would feel like they can't be themselves, you're probably working for a boss who doesn't care about you, who you are as an individual, who never asks you anything personal, never says, hey, how are you doing? You work with teammates that also don't really care. So one thing about feeling free to be who you are, it's because you've got people that are encouraging that, to say, Nurjan, tell me about your background. Where are you coming to us from? How's your week going? Right, so that they're bringing that out. At a more kind of systematic level, it's what kind of policies or practices are in place at an organizational level. To what extent is collaboration encouraged? Are people encouraged to talk across departments, get to know one another? So it's somebody who's walking in the door and saying, I'm going to do my job, I'm going to interact with people, but I'm not going to self-disclose. I'll probably dress in a particular way. And accordingly, if I'm not sharing myself, I'm maybe not contributing all my unique ideas. And I'm not trying to make decisions on my own or go the extra mile and do what my boss does. Yeah.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying. I think one of the fundamental psychological variables that maybe wasn't measured here but's related is safety.
Oh,
psychological safety.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the research on inclusion and identity freedom is really on how safe is it for me to disclose all these things. And then related to that is acceptance, right? Like, will my peers accept me the way I am? Anyway, in my other class, the work motivation people will talk about self-determination theory, where safety is a major factor in engagement and work motivation. So you don't feel like you're safe, you really can't, flourish. So anyway, wanted to share that.
No, I think that's excellent, and we didn't measure it, and I think if we did, we'd see that played a big role. And indeed, I think that could probably be also considered a perception of just kind of a climate, how things are. Right? When I talk about climate, it's just people's perceptions of how are things around here. And one of those perceptions might be it's not safe to share ideas. It's not safe to disagree with the boss. Yeah.
So let's say I have 500 employees, and I've been that boss who really doesn't care, and there isn't a culture where people can really be who they are. And I have this crazy awakening, and I come back from an ashram in India, and I hire you to come into my organization. I say, I've been doing this wrong for the last 30 years, and I really want to create a culture where everyone can feel safe enough to disclose who they are, what they're about, and totally own who they are. How would you, I mean, I know it's,
That's a great question. That's, I would say, can we say that?
Yeah.
So I'll talk about some of the things. Yeah, I mean, it's the most important question, really. So let's save it for the end so that we could actually have a group discussion. I feel so compelled to just get through these. We'll get through the boring research and then we'll have an interesting conversation. But yeah, the million-dollar question is, okay, if we know that it's important for people to be themselves at work, how do we encourage that? I think the issue is that there's probably not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. And my approach would be, it starts with understanding and it starts with assessment. Instead of, kind of answering the question right now, but if inclusion is about hearing voices, then where you start is that manager has to start by talking to his or her employees and say, what can I do? Not I'm going to figure it out, or not what's the consultant going to do to say, hey, this is what you need to do. Let's start with assessment, let's start with observation, and say, where have the issues been around people feeling excluded? What what do your employees think would make them feel more included, and then let's do those things. But we could probably come up with like 5 or 6 like slam dunks. But I would say, you know, as an overall thing, as a consultant coming in, it's let's hear employees' voices. Yes.
Was the population of police officers selected specifically to, because I would think the climate for innovation and identity and freedom might be issues in a police environment. So were police officers selected specifically because you're going towards those things, or did that just happen to be the pool that you were working with?
So it kind of happened to be, the reason that the origin of this project is that there were issues in this municipality. There are many issues that we'll just say are diversity related. So it had to do with interactions among employees of different backgrounds. It had to do with promotion. It had to do with generally, you know, fair treatment and promotion through the ranks. So there were a lot of pretty bad issues, and I'm trying to remember if there were lawsuits or not, but the chief diversity officer came in and as a starting point said, we need to just figure out what's going on with people's perceptions first. It just so happened to be that in the municipality, it was, the police department was a very big part of the city. There's police, there's fire, there's planners, there's parks and rec, there's all kind of city departments, there's utilities, energy, there's all of the kind of different departments, but police was a big part of it. But you also raised an interesting point in that we're talking about there are bound to be industry specific as well as job specific issues around diversity. And sometimes this is because of certain job requirements, we can encourage this more or less. And, you know, police, for just a very concrete thing is police officers have to wear a uniform. And generally that's a good thing for just, you know, identifying yourself to you know, citizens. So it will always depend. Other questions on this one? Those are really great. As our main dependent variable of interest, were people's turnover intentions. That was another big thing, and the reason that we did, that we were contracted to do the work, is that they were just having a lot of retention issues. And oftentimes working for city government isn't the most kind of attractive position in the first place. So then, you know, when people are leaving and they think it might have to do with, and certain groups of people are leaving, it's like, let's figure out what's going on. So turnover intentions. And then we also wanted to take into account how long people have been with the organization as well as their level, their job level. I'll try to do this fairly generally because the statistical analyses were somewhat complex. But I split up into different stages. So the first stage, we did an exploratory factor analysis, and the goal here was just to figure out, again, there was those 6 dimensions versus the 2 dimensions. How many different things do employees have in their mind that constitutes a climate for diversity? The punchline here is that what we found is that really employees are thinking about just these 2 things. So it boils down to fair treatment as well as equal access. So all the different survey items kind of went together so that people answered more similarly among these things. So equal treatment had to do with the questions related to the workplace is free from lack of bias, and that generally people get along. So there's good treatment, good relationships. And then equal access had to do with structural and informal integration, people's perceptions that that different groups are represented, equally represented at different levels, and that people have equal access to career and mentoring opportunities, things like that. And then we also just, in terms of just measurement stuff, found support for our 4 distinct measurement for our psychological variables. At a second stage of data analysis, we did a confirmatory factor analysis, found support for the 7 factors I just described, and then we, I know one person in the room who is good. We wanted to evaluate the fit of a couple different models. So, in other words, is it the case that people are really thinking about two different things like treatment and equal access, or is it just all kind of one global impression of diversity is managed well around here? They do have a differentiated perception. They're thinking separately about treatment and access. Okay, and we also tested whether different groups of employees think about diversity climate more or less in the same way. So you could say, oh, well, white men are thinking mainly in terms of equal treatment, equal access, but other groups might have a more differentiated perspective and think about a more kind of granular approach. That wasn't the case, so there's equivalent across different groups in the organization. And then finally, at stage 3, we created a model where we tested our hypotheses. And this is what it looked like. So let me walk you through. Again, so what we have are diversity climate dimensions. So employees' perceptions of equal treatment as well as equal access. And this was a model that we got to after testing and refinement. And I'll say that this is kind of our view of the world. It's important when you do this type of work. There's other models that fit in terms of where variables are positioned, but this was what made sense to us, and empirically this is what fit the pattern of data.
Are those the path coefficients that are significant, or?
Yeah, so I think all path coefficients that were over a certain amount, which I think that's the lowest one, were statistically significant because of how big a sample we had.
So everything there basically?
Everything here is considered statistically significant. Yeah, thank you for raising that question. I should have flagged them with asterisks, but yes.
Can you explain the difference between minus and the plus for the first year students?
Oh, sure. So where we have a positive number, we just mean that there's a positive relationship between one variable and another variable. So in other words, the more that employees feel that they're treated well and that there's with respect, dignity, and that all groups are treated equally, they'll feel like, the more they feel like they can be themselves at work. And then where we see kind of the big negative number in the model, well, let's just do a path. Let's do a path. But this is what this model is saying, is that the more people feel like all groups are treated equally and that there's good relationships, the more they feel like they can be themselves, which leads, positive relationship, to feeling a sense of identification with one's organization. The organization's problems are my own, et cetera, which then we have a negative relation, so they are, the more they feel identified with the organization, the less likely they are to leave. So yeah, thank you for that. What you can see is that, again, positive correlation. These things are very strongly related to one another. So the more that people feel that employees of different groups are treated well and equally, the more they also feel that, and there's good representation across levels of the organization. So those things tend to go together in people's minds.
It's surprising that identity, freedom, and innovation climate are so, I mean, you're saying it's significant, but it's a very small relationship.
That's
I would
right.
have expected that to be much larger.
I would have
since the
too.
concepts-
I would have too.
Yes, and it's actually, there's another larger
that's why.
impact through the indirect path. Identity
Yeah.
freedom influences psychological empowerment with a pretty strong correlation, and psychological empowerment to climate for innovation with a pretty strong correlation. If you multiply those two together, you get almost 0.25. And
That's
so
the
that's
explanation.
twice as strong as the direct impact of identity freedom on climate for innovation.
So indeed, thank you. That's exactly what's happening. That we see a direct relationship here at all is actually something because, as Jonathan observed, there's not only the direct relationship,